Hi there everybody. I thought I would just share a few thoughts about what we call piloting in Hypnoetics. It's a name we give for the process of helping straighten out what's going on in a person's mind, to get things straighter, clearer. Clarity, that's an important point, but we also work towards what we call shift, meaning seeing things in a new way, or more exactly, seeing things from a new place. The old things in a new way, or new things in a new way, but from a new place. And it's very helpful. People get engaged at a terrific level and they find that their mental prowess goes up considerably. It's not difficult to know why. What's happening is that we're taking the person's attention off the past, off of failures, hurts, setbacks, upsets, and so forth. Quite a lot of our attention units are trapped back in time there, down the timeline. And if we release them and the person has all these attention units back to the present, in the now as it were, then it's really very beneficial. The way I think of this, in a sense, is it's kind of like healing memory. Now I'm using the term pilot in the sense of a guide, like a riverboat captain or an ocean liner when it comes into dock. A pilot comes aboard to guide the boat into a safe harbor. Essentially, that's what we're doing with our piloting. We're steering the person onto the appropriate, relevant parts of the mind. How do we know? Well, one of it's good training and a good science and good understanding of what we're trying to do. Another way we can benefit this is using a biofeedback meter. This is a fairly simple technique. Skin resistance changes according to certain circumstances. You know, the old lie detector idea. Well, Cleve Baxter, the late Cleve Baxter, who was a friend of mine, showed, for example, that even plants could react to perceptions of the environment. And of course, plants don't have a brain or a nervous system, but they could clearly perceive. They reacted and responded. Of course, his critics say, well, they couldn't have, therefore you must have faked all the results. But, you know, I've met the man, I've been to his laboratory, and sincerely, there's no question that plants are able to react to humans. Well, of course, the same applies to we humans too. When we have emotional changes, our body chemistry and biochemistry, physiology changes. This is the whole basis of the lie detector. You know, if someone's committed a murder and somebody says, did you murder Jane Doe? The person is going to get all stressed up because they did, and you can see the reaction on a meter. So, of course, it's useful. Now, a lot of people have said, you know, you must be like the Scientologists. No, I'm nothing like the Scientologists. Anyone would think that they're the only people that could use a biofeedback device. In fact, they took their work from an earlier trainer. Listen, if you want to know this story, rather than me waste time now, if you want to know the true train and history or development of the galvanic skin response meter, including lie detectors, but I don't go into the lie detector part of the story, then see my book, Medicine Beyond, chapter 14. And on this page, lower down, I'm going to set you a link where you can download this chapter and read it all for yourself and just see what the history and the story is. I'm saying that we can use this device. We don't have to use this device. It's useful early on, actually, when we get trainee pilots, because they can tell very easily where the trouble lies, you know, and it's not the obvious thing. This is what counselors and practitioners and therapists, psychotherapists have to get over, is that it's not the obvious thing, or at least the obvious thing may not be available to work with. You know, say someone's got severe PTSD, that may not be the way to go. I know lots of people have got crashed by diving straight into the PTSD stuff, even though it's obvious, you know, the guy was a Vietnam vet or a Gulf War vet or whatever. You've got to run what the mind considers available and what is the most useful at that point in time. And it may be something really quite shallow, you know, like being fired from the last work. Or, you know, a pet dog died or something. So you deal with those. And then gradually you can get in there and maybe start to work on the PTSD issues. So knowing when to go and knowing where to go is really the key part of this, and that's what makes piloting so powerful. You see, you can't treat everyone as having the same situation and the same issues. Now, I don't mean the same narratives and the same history, but that everyone is approachable in the same way. You simply have to step into the person's case as it is, as that person's case is. And as I said, it's healing memory. Now, there are various ways of doing that. The most tempting, perhaps, and the quickest is to cover them all over like wallpapering over the cracks. Nobody sees the cracks anymore. That's all good until the house suddenly falls apart. The wall comes down because nobody actually solved the issue of the crack. And it can be like that in counselling and psychotherapy. In the very worst kind of examples of that, the counsellor is trying to tell a person what's wrong and trying to tell them how to deal with it. They're laying on wallpaper with a trowel and a shovel. And it doesn't work. What actually works is releasing the memory from its position in the timeline. Now, we don't lose the memories, but what happens if we do it the right way is it disconnects it from the pain on the upset, the emotional charges, as we call it. There, we use this term charge. That's not meant to mean that in the extreme back of the mind everything is electrical. Remember, we're not using the brain model, but nevertheless we have this concept of emotional charge. It's in common currency now. I think a lot of people use that idea. I've tried to think what it might be actually. If consciousness is non-material, then of course thought itself is non-material. Charge appears to behave like negative emotional energy, but that couldn't be the fullest explanation because energy is something material. I laugh when people talk about spiritual energy. There's no such thing. It's either spiritual or it's energy. Energy and matter are the same thing. You probably know that's what Einstein taught us. His famous equation said energy is equivalent to matter itself. So, psychic energy doesn't really make sense. Nevertheless, something's going on in there. So is this some kind of ripple or corruption of consciousness? I think so. That's probably the best or the simplest explanation for now. But anyway, back to what we do. So we have a person who is not doing 100% well in life. Listen, nobody is. But a person is taking control and responsibility and wants to improve things. They want to see a better life. They want to create something awesome, an epic life, some people. I can't live at less than epic. It would be boring. Other people are maybe discouraged, a little nervous of making changes. Well, this piloting can help with that. We take it in stages and grades at various levels of increasing ability until the person can confront really just about everything. What happens is it's a one-on-one situation, and the pilot is usually a skilled person who's been thoroughly trained. I've got to say that I'm planning a project in the next couple of weeks where I'm going to do my very best to teach members of the lay public how to do it on each other so we can pair them up and they can hack away at each other's memories, as it were. Obviously, we'll need a team of expert pilots in the background to pick up the pieces if it goes wrong for anybody, but I think I can do it. But historically, more typically, the situation has been a skilled pilot and a client that wants some work doing. They sit down and work together. The communication between them is crucially important. The client has to trust the pilot, knows what he's doing, but the pilot has to be efficient and competent, and we value a sort of quiet, business-like kind of communication. We don't want to be sympathetic. We don't want to go, "Oh, you poor thing," kind of response, because there's two problems with that. One is that it kind of rewards the person in the way they get sympathy, which can be a kind of reward. But the other way is it sort of implies you can't do anything. It's a much better idea to say, "Okay, we'll fix that," in about the same tone of voice that you'd say, "Please pass the salt." So if someone's in a heavy, unpleasant experience, you just say, "Well, I want you to go back and I want you to really bring this memory to life and then talk me through it. What happened? What do you see? What do you feel?" This is a very broad explanation. There are actually precise targets that we nail and aim at. One is the emotion itself. Another aspect is the person's thoughts or decisions. Although thought is non-material, it does hold the whole thing in place. If a person had a bad PTSD experience in the wartime, it's the thoughts about that hold it all in place. And if you can dismantle the whole thing, it will collapse. But you have to start with the emotions, and more exactly the physical movement and energy that's involved in the situation, whether it's a person trying to push something back, or they've lost a loved one, they're trying to pull him or her towards them. There's always some kind of energetic aspect to a memory too. But once all that is cleaned up, then the thoughts and decisions pop into view, and these are typically very disempowering decisions, oh God, I'll never do that again, or I'm just no good with men don't seem to like me, or damn, I'm useless at study, I'm never going to get anywhere in life, I'll never get my degree, or whatever the person is doing. These kind of self-destruct thoughts that get stuck in place, and they're held in place by the negative emotions and the force or the power of the event, but also the thought itself is holding them in place. So it's kind of a triad structure that we pull apart. This is all, by the way, totally in accordance with 21st century science. They've now realized through sufficient research that a memory can be very bendable and very plastic and adjustable at the first moment of recall. You have to recall it in a particular way, as I was saying, by making it come alive again, as at the moment of creation. You can also make certain aspects of this vanish. Now, the beautiful thing is, the memory itself doesn't vanish. In fact, the memory will appear stronger and brighter than ever, because it's now not blackened and darkened with hurt and upset and this negative energy or charge I was talking about. And it really is very helpful. As I said, healing memory. We can even do it to the future. We know somebody, say a parent is going to die anytime soon. We can sit the person down and say, well, let's run the future memory and take a horrible lot of the sting out of it when the loved parent finally does die. So even future memory. And one of the very powerful aspects that we do with it is to run other people's points of view. That's very empowering. It teaches compassion and love, and it teaches understanding of others and why they're like they are and what their motivations are. It's funny, but if you've been through a divorce, say your husband behaved like a pig and made everything as unpleasant as possible, we can sit the wife down, and when we've cleaned up her charge so that she feels okay, I'm moving on, we can then put her back in the husband's position and say, now run it from his point of view. And there's often a number of shocks and surprises. First of all, the big surprise is that she knows exactly what he was thinking. She knows exactly what emotion he was experiencing, even if none of this was voiced. But it also teaches you that the other person has their reasons, as it were, so there's compassion in that. And also she may realize that the husband suffered quite a lot of hurt too. And listen, if this gets really good, then she starts to look at, well, what did I do that made this whole screw-up situation happen? I could have done better, certainly. Yeah, he could have done a lot better, but so could I. And so healing goes on, and it expands outwards, like, when you drop a stone in the pond, there's ripples outwards. These ripples spread, and they realign other things in a person's life. In fact, one of the tricks from neuro-linguistic programming that we can borrow is then moving forward on the timeline, reprocessing everything right up until the now. How would it be, like back then, I'll use the wife example, back then she wished she'd been kinder and more patient and more tolerant, or she went into hysterics because the husband was on a business weekend somewhere and slept with a floozy. It happens, but then she decided, well, that's it, I have to leave you, it's all over, the marriage is finished, you betrayed me. A lot of people later wish they hadn't done that. It's what people think they're supposed to do, but it's not very clever. And I know lots of very strong, solid couples where the person has been forgiving and it's been rebuilt, and they ended up with a relationship that was as strong as ever. But most people, as I say, regret doing it years later. I saw an interesting survey back in the 80s, maybe even the late 70s, I think it was 80s, where surveyors, investigators found that 85% of people wished they were back with their first partner. 85% of divorced people wish they were back with their first partner. Well, of course, that's not so crazy, because 50% of them, probably for sure, 50% didn't want the breakup to happen. But of the other half, at least 35% more wished they hadn't done it. It was just a mess. And I've got a saying in Hypnoetics, really, that divorce doesn't solve anything. You just take your baggage to the next screw-up. So anyway, this is what I mean by healing memory. You heal the past, you can sort of backwards engineer what happened. That's a term, by the way, used in a scientific paper by somebody from Harvard University, one of the researchers. So we're sort of backwards engineering memories, but then they don't bother with the other bit, but we do, which is running forward into the now with how would it be? What would it change if she had been compassionate? Then, you know, on that date when she bumped into him on the street, she could have been kind and loving instead of you know, being extremely rude or crossing the road and walking in the other direction. It happens, trying to run him down with a car and because of her anger. So things are healed since then, and we can even send a person out a few years into the future to say, how will that work now? How's it going to be for you now you've got these changes? And you'll see that people do utterly and totally transform, and that's one of the words we use. We have in Hypnoetics the protocols for change and human transformation. This is very important. Now, I'll just finish up with a few words about our little sort of baby brother subject that I called Hypnoetics. Now, it sounds like hypnosis, but it isn't really hypnosis. In fact, it's more like unhypnotizing people. It's taking their attention off these events in the past, cleaning them up so that they're no longer hurtful or distressing. And I mean really cleaning them up, you know, not just telling yourself or doing affirmations, I no longer care. It's that the whole structure of that memory has changed and has been refiled on the timeline as what I call clean, useful memory. In other words, it works for you as a memory, but you don't have to suffer when you recall it, and that's crucial. So Hypnoetics is a very simple beginner's technique. We don't use a biofeedback device. I think I can teach a person to do it across a coffee table, or you know, two sat side by side on a sofa, just talking to each other. The very simple things, if you do it right, will really resolve very quickly. And you know, believe it or not, it's often the simplest things that produce the most reward. Like I was giving you that example of a woman and a divorce and a tragedy to do with the marriage, and probably the kids were suffering too. Just one shift of perception could have averted the whole thing. I see what place I had in this and what I did to create the unhappy marriage, and I wished that I had fixed it at the time, but now I have fixed it and all comes good. That might seem a big upheaval, but you know, it might only take an hour of running through memories of the, you know, the last 12 months, say, when all the quarrels and upsets were at their worst. And doing it the way we teach, the woman suddenly realizes, hey, you know, I was a part of this too. It wasn't this beast did nasty things to me. It was together. We were not good, and I could have done more. I wished I'd done more. One of the things I found, sorry, I'm kind of being sidetracked slightly, but I do want to share this, discovered in my researches over the years, and this will resonate with some of you, I know, the more skilled or perceptive of you. But there are three cases in a relationship, okay? There's the man's case. By the case, you just mean, you know, the sum of all the sort of personality traits, the negative, the dysfunctional behaviors and hectic emotions and all those things a person experiences. That's the case, or the negative part of the case. Of course, the wife has a case too, but what came as the big aha for me was realizing there's a third piece, which is their joint case. And you know, you can clean up the man, he feels great. You can clean up the woman and her case is good. Now they're both good, except they still can't make it together. They still crash into each other because there's this middle third case that hasn't been touched. So you have to address that case as a separate thing. That's a bit beyond hypnoetics, actually. I don't know why I sidetracked to tell you that, but it just seemed relevant since I was deeply into this example of a divorce with an unhappy wife and an unhappy husband. Okay, well, I hope I've given you some hints and some flavors of what this is all about and how it can work. It's been highly successful in the development period, and we've had some marvelous stuff, wonderful stories of people completely changing their life in, you know, very excited ways, and we're very grateful of that too. So it'd be nice if you come on board, but at least give us a test drive, check it out, see how it works. We'll help you out. All you have to do is enroll on the Hypnoetics course when it's announced. Thanks very much. Take care.